Sarah Martinez pulled her old Honda into the empty parking lot of Techno Warehouse at exactly 9:45 p.m. The building looked dark and lonely against the cloudy night sky. Only a few streetlights were working and they made long shadows across the cracked pavement. Sarah turned off her car engine and sat quietly for a moment. She did this every night before work. It helped her get ready for another long shift. At 24 years old, Sarah was small and thin. Most people thought she looked too weak to be a security guard. Her co-workers at the warehouse always made jokes about her size. They would laugh and say things like, how could she stop a real thief? Or what would she do if someone big tried to rob the place? Sarah never got angry at their jokes. She would just smile quietly and keep doing her job. But there was something they did not know about her. Something she kept secret. Before working at the warehouse, Sarah had been a soldier. She spent 3 years in the Army as a military police officer. She had been to dangerous places overseas twice. She knew how to use weapons and how to stay calm when things got scary. She had seen real trouble and handled it well. But then she hurt her leg badly in an accident and had to leave the Army. The doctor said she could not run or jump like before. So she came home and took the easy job at the warehouse while she figured out what to do next. Sarah got out of her car and walked toward the building. She carried a small bag with her dinner and a thermos of coffee. Her uniform was neat and clean. On her belt she wore a radio, a flashlight, and her service weapon. The gun was something she was very good at using but hoped she would never need. The warehouse stored expensive computers and electronic equipment worth millions of dollars. It was supposed to be a safe neighborhood, but Sarah always stayed ready just in case. The day guard met her at the front door. His name was Bob, and he was getting close to retirement. Bob was a friendly man who liked to talk about his grandchildren. He always seemed happy to see Sarah when she arrived for work. Tonight he looked tired and ready to go home to his family. "Good evening, Sarah," Bob said with a smile. "Everything has been quiet today. No problems at all. The delivery trucks finished up around 4, and there have been no visitors since then. The alarm system is working fine and all the cameras are clear." Sarah nodded and took the keys and clipboard from Bob. She checked the logbook to see what had happened during the day shift. There were notes about a few repairmen who had fixed some lights and a supervisor who had checked on some new equipment. Nothing seemed unusual or worrying. Bob gathered his things and headed for the door. "You have a good night, Sarah." Bob called back to her. "See you tomorrow evening." Sarah waved goodbye and locked the door behind him. Now she was alone in the big building. This was how she liked it best. During the day there were always people around making noise and asking questions. At night it was peaceful and quiet. She could do her job without anyone bothering her or making comments about how she looked too small to be a guard. Sarah walked to the security office in the center of the building. It was a small room with monitors showing pictures from cameras all around the warehouse. She could see every door and hallway from her chair. There was also a desk with paperwork and a small refrigerator where she kept her food. The radio on the desk could reach the main company office, but only during business hours. After 5 p.m., she was completely on her own. She sat down and looked at all the camera screens. Everything appeared normal and safe. The loading dock was empty and locked tight. The storage areas were full of boxes and equipment sitting exactly where they should be. The emergency exits were secure, and the motion sensors showed no activity anywhere in the building. Sarah felt good about starting another quiet night. But 3 blocks away, something was happening that would change everything. 3 men sat in a stolen van watching the warehouse through binoculars. They had been planning this job for weeks. They knew exactly when the day guard left and when the night guard came on duty. They knew about the alarm system and the cameras. They thought they knew about Sarah too. The leader of the group was a man named Marcus. He was 42 years old and had been robbing places for most of his adult life. He was big and mean and not afraid of anyone. With him were 2 other men. One was named Dave and he was good with electronics and alarms. The third man was just 19 years old. Everyone called him Kid because he was new to crime and still nervous about breaking the law. Marcus looked at his watch and smiled. The little girl guard would be settling in for her shift right about now. He and his partners had watched her for a week. She looked scared of her own shadow. This was going to be the easiest job they had ever done. They would be in and out with a truck full of expensive computers before she even knew they were there. "We move in 1 hour," Marcus told the others. "Dave, you take care of the alarms like we planned. Kid, you watch for other people and keep quiet. I will handle the guard if she gives us any trouble. But she won not. Look at her. She probably weighs about 100 pounds soaking wet. The three men laughed and checked their weapons. They had everything they needed. Wire cutters for the fence, tools for the locks, guns in case things went wrong. They were sure this was going to be their biggest score ever. The warehouse was full of equipment they could sell for hundreds of thousands of dollars. And all that stood between them and that money was one small young woman who looked like she would run away at the first sign of danger. But Marcus and his friends had made a big mistake. They saw Sarah the way her coworkers saw her. They saw someone small and quiet and thought that meant weak and scared. They had no idea that behind her calm face was the mind of a trained soldier. Someone who had faced real enemies with real weapons in real battles. Someone who knew how to think fast and stay cool when lives were on the line. Sarah finished her first walk around the building and returned to the security office. She made notes in the logbook and checked all the camera screens again. Everything still looked peaceful. She opened her bag and took out a sandwich for dinner. As she ate, she thought about her plans for the weekend. Maybe she would visit her family or go to a movie with friends. Simple, normal things that made her happy. She had no idea that in less than 2 hours her quiet life was about to become a war zone. She did not know that 3 dangerous men were getting ready to break into her building. She could not imagine that by morning she would be famous and that people would be calling her a hero. All she knew was that she felt safe and comfortable doing a job that most people thought she was not strong enough to handle. But strength comes in many forms, and sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one nobody expects. Sarah had finished her sandwich and was starting her second cup of coffee when she heard it, a soft scraping sound coming from somewhere near the loading dock. She stopped chewing and listened carefully. The sound came again. It was quiet, but it did not belong. After 3 months of working nights at the warehouse, Sarah knew every normal sound the building made. This was not one of them. She put down her coffee cup and stood up slowly. Her heart began to beat a little faster, but her hands stayed steady. This was something her army training had taught her. When danger might be coming, you stay calm and think clearly. Panic makes you do stupid things that get you hurt or killed. Sarah walked to the bank of security monitors and looked at each screen carefully. At first, everything appeared normal. Then she saw movement on camera number 7, which watched the loading dock area. 3 dark shapes were moving along the fence behind the building. They were dressed in black clothes and moving in a way that was trying to stay hidden. Sarah felt her stomach tighten, but her mind became sharp and focused. She had seen people move like this before when she was a soldier overseas. These were not lost teenagers or homeless people looking for a place to sleep. These were professionals who knew what they were doing. They had come here for a reason, and that reason was not good. She watched the monitors as the 3 figures approached the rear entrance of the building. One of them had a bag full of tools. Another was looking around constantly to watch for trouble. The third man was bigger than the others and seemed to be giving orders. They moved to the alarm box on the outside wall and began working on it with wire cutters and other equipment. Sarah reached for the radio to call for help, but then remembered it only worked during business hours. She was completely alone. The nearest police station was 20 minutes away, even if she could find a way to contact them. Her cell phone was in her car in the parking lot. She could try to run outside and get it, but that would mean leaving the building unguarded and probably running right into the intruders. Instead, she made a different choice. Sarah opened the desk drawer and took out her service weapon. It was a pistol she had carried for years in the army and knew how to use very well. She checked to make sure it was loaded and ready. Then she turned off the lights in the security office so the monitors would not give away her position. On the screens, she watched the 3 men finish disabling the alarm system. They had done this before and they were good at it. Within minutes, they had the back door open and were inside the building. Sarah could see them clearly on the interior cameras now. The big man had a rifle. The one with the tools carried a pistol. Even the youngest one, who looked nervous, had a gun stuck in his belt. Sarah felt something change inside her mind. The scared young woman that her coworkers saw every day disappeared. In her place was the soldier she had been trained to be. Someone who could face armed enemies and figure out how to survive. She began thinking like a warrior instead of a victim. The 3 intruders split up as soon as they got inside. The big man, who was obviously the leader, pointed in different directions and sent his partners to search separate parts of the building. This was smart tactics, but it also gave Sarah an opportunity. If she could deal with them one at a time instead of all together, She might have a chance. Sarah left the security office and began moving through the warehouse. She knew every hallway and storage room by heart. She could move quietly in the dark while the intruders had to use flashlights that gave away their positions. This was her territory, and she was going to use that advantage. She followed the youngest criminal who had gone toward the electronic storage area. He was walking slowly and looking around nervously. Sarah could tell he did not really want to be here. He was probably new to this kind of work and scared of getting caught. That fear would make him easier to surprise. The young man stopped in front of a rack of expensive computer equipment. He pulled out his phone and took pictures of the serial numbers. Sarah realized they were not just stealing random items. They had a list of specific things they wanted. This was a professional operation that had been planned carefully. Sarah moved closer, staying in the shadows between the storage racks. The young criminal was so focused on the computers that he did not notice her approaching. When she was close enough, Sarah stepped out behind him and pressed her gun against the back of his neck. "Do not move," she said in a quiet but firm voice. "Do not make any sound. Put your hands up slowly." The young man froze completely. Sarah could feel him shaking. He was more scared now than she was. That was good. Fear would make him do what she told him to do. "Drop your weapon," she ordered. "Use your left hand only and place it on the floor gently." The pistol clattered softly on the concrete floor. Sarah kicked it away into the darkness where he could not reach it. Then she took plastic zip ties from her belt and secured his hands behind his back. These were something she always carried as part of her security equipment, but had never expected to actually use. "What is your name?" she asked. "They call me Kid," he whispered. "Please do not hurt me. I did not want to do this. Marcus made me come, so the big man was named Marcus." Sarah filed that information away. She needed to know as much as possible about what she was facing. "How many of you are there?" she asked. "Just 3 of us," Kid said. "Me and Marcus and Dave. Please let me go. I promise I will never come back here." Sarah almost felt sorry for him, but she knew letting him go would be a mistake. He would warn the others, and then she would lose her advantage. Instead, she had a different idea. "You are going to help me," she told him. "You are going to call your friends and tell them you found something important. Tell them to come to this room right away." Kid looked confused and scared, but he did what she ordered. He called out in a shaky voice that he had found the best stuff and they needed to see it right away. Then Sarah moved into position behind a concrete pillar, where she could watch the entrance to the storage area. Within minutes, she heard footsteps coming down the hallway. 2 sets of boots walking quickly toward the room. Sarah held her weapon ready and waited. Her heart was pounding, but her hands were rock steady. Everything she had learned in the army was coming back to her now. How to set up an ambush, how to use cover and concealment, how to stay calm when people with guns were trying to kill you. The footsteps got closer. Sarah could hear the 2 men talking quietly to each other as they approached. In a few seconds, they would walk into her trap. She thought about her co-workers who always joked that she was too weak to handle real trouble. She thought about the 3 criminals who had seen her as an easy target. They were all about to learn that appearances could be very deceiving. The first man appeared in the doorway. It was Marcus, the leader. Behind him came Dave with his bag of tools and electronics. They both had their weapons ready, but they were looking around the room for Kid and the valuable equipment. He had called them to see instead. They found their young partner sitting on the floor, with his hands tied behind his back. And they found Sarah standing behind the concrete pillar with her gun pointed directly at them. "Neither of you move," she said in a voice that was calm and completely in control. "Drop your weapons now or I will shoot you both." The war had begun. Marcus stared at Sarah in complete shock. His mouth hung open and his eyes went wide. This was not supposed to happen. The little security guard was supposed to be hiding in her office or running away scared. She was not supposed to be standing there pointing a gun at him like some kind of trained soldier. For a long moment, nobody moved. Dave stood frozen next to Marcus with his bag of tools still in his hand. Kid sat on the floor looking back and forth between his criminal partners and the woman who had captured him. The only sound in the room was the quiet hum of the air conditioning system. Sarah kept her weapon steady and her voice calm. She had learned in the army that showing fear or uncertainty could get you killed. Even when you were scared inside, you had to act strong and confident. Right now, she was outnumbered and outgunned, but she had surprise on her side and she was going to use it. "I said drop your weapons," Sarah repeated. "Do it now or I start shooting." Marcus slowly began to understand what was happening. This was not some frightened girl who had gotten lucky. The way she stood and held her gun told him she knew exactly what she was doing. Her voice was steady and her aim never wavered. She was dangerous. "Lady, you do not know what you are getting into," Marcus said, trying to sound tough. "There are 3 of us and only 1 of you. Be smart and walk away. We will take what we came for and nobody gets hurt." Sarah almost smiled at his words. If only he knew how wrong he was. She had faced groups of armed men before in places much more dangerous than this warehouse. 3 small-time criminals did not scare her at all. "You are going to drop your weapons and get on the ground," she told them. "You have 5 seconds to decide. 1, 2, wait, Marcus said, holding up one hand. "Let us talk about this. You do not need to do this the hard way. We can work something out. 3. Sarah continued counting. Dave started to panic. He could see that this woman was not going to back down. His hands began to shake as he realized their easy robbery had turned into something very dangerous. "Marcus, do something," Dave whispered. 4, Sarah said. All right, Marcus shouted. "We are putting them down." He slowly bent over and placed his rifle on the concrete floor. Dave did the same with his pistol. But Sarah noticed that Marcus kept looking around the room like he was planning something. She had seen that look before in enemy fighters who were getting ready to make a desperate move. "Now get on the ground, face down," Sarah ordered. "Hands behind your heads." Marcus and Dave slowly got down on their knees and then laid flat on the floor. Sarah moved carefully around the room, staying behind cover while she collected their weapons. She kicked the guns far away from where they could reach them. Then she took more zip ties from her belt and secured both men with their hands behind their backs. "This is crazy," Marcus said, as Sarah tightened the plastic ties around his wrists. "You have no idea who you are messing with. When we do not check in with our people, they will come looking for us. And they will not be as nice as we are." Sarah ignored his threats. She had heard similar words from captured enemies overseas. Criminals and terrorists always claimed they had powerful friends who would come for revenge. Most of the time, it was just empty talk meant to scare their captors. She looked around the storage room and realized she had a problem. The space was too big, with too many places where someone could hide or take cover. If she was going to keep 3 armed criminals under control for any length of time, she needed to move them somewhere smaller and easier to watch. "We are going to the server room," Sarah announced. "All of you get up slowly and walk where I tell you to walk." The server room was in the center of the building and had only one entrance. It was filled with expensive computer equipment, but it was much smaller than the storage area. Sarah could position herself so she could watch all 3 prisoners in the doorway at the same time. The 3 men struggled to their feet with their hands tied behind their backs. Sarah stayed behind them with her gun ready as they walked through the dark hallways of the warehouse. She used her flashlight to guide them but kept the beam low, so it would not give away their position if anyone else was in the building. When they reached the server room, Sarah made them sit on the floor against the far wall. The room was about 20 feet square and filled with tall racks of computer servers. The equipment made a constant humming noise that would help cover any sounds they made. More importantly, the room had thick concrete walls and no windows. Even if they shouted for help, nobody outside would hear them. Sarah positioned herself near the doorway where she could see all 3 prisoners and watch for anyone approaching from the hallway. She kept her weapon pointed in their direction, but tried not to look directly at any one of them for too long. She had to stay alert for tricks or sudden movements. "Now we wait," Sarah said simply. "Wait for what?" Marcus asked angrily. "What do you think is going to happen here, lady? You cannot hold us forever. Sooner or later you're going to get tired or distracted, and then we are going to turn this situation around." Sarah did not answer him. She was thinking about her options, and none of them were good. She could not call for help because her radio did not work and her cell phone was in her car. She could try to walk to the parking lot, but that would mean leaving the prisoners alone and they would probably escape. Her only choice was to stay here and guard them until someone came to work in the morning. But morning was still 8 hours away. That was a very long time to keep 3 dangerous criminals under control by herself. Sarah had been trained for situations like this, but training and real life were different things. In training, there was always backup coming and the enemy was using fake bullets. Here she was completely on her own with men who would kill her if they got the chance. Marcus must have been thinking the same thing because he started talking again. "You know you cannot do this all night," he said. "You are going to get tired. You are going to make a mistake. And when you do, we are going to be ready." Dave here is good with electronics. He can have those zip ties off in minutes if you give him the chance. And Kid might look scared, but he is fast and mean when he needs to be. Sarah looked at the 3 prisoners sitting against the wall. Marcus was right about one thing. This was going to be the longest night of her life. She was facing hours of staying alert and ready while 3 criminals tried everything they could think of to escape or overpower her. But Marcus was also wrong about something important. He thought she was just a security guard who had gotten lucky. He had no idea that she was a trained soldier who had spent months in dangerous places staying awake and alert, while enemies tried to kill her. He did not know that she had been through survival training and combat situations that were much worse than this. Sarah settled into position and made herself comfortable. She had food and water with her, and she knew how to stay focused for long periods of time. She also knew that the criminals were probably more tired and stressed than she was. They had been planning this job for weeks, and now it had gone completely wrong. They were scared and angry, and that would make them sloppy. The real battle was just beginning. It would not be decided by who had the most guns or the most people. It would be won by whoever could stay strong and smart the longest. Sarah had been underestimated her whole life, but she had always proven people wrong in the end. Tonight would be no different. The first hour passed slowly. Sarah stood near the doorway of the server room with her gun pointed at the 3 criminals sitting against the far wall. The only sounds were the humming of computer, equipment, and the quiet breathing of 4 people, who were all waiting for something to happen. Marcus kept staring at Sarah, trying to figure out what kind of person she really was. He had robbed dozens of places over the years and dealt with security guards before. Most of them were old men who just wanted to finish their shifts and go home safely. Some were young guys who thought they were tough until real trouble showed up. But this woman was different. She stood perfectly still like a statue, and her gun never moved even a little bit. Dave was getting nervous. Sweat was running down his face even though the room was cool. He kept looking at the zip ties around his wrists and trying to figure out if he could work them loose. But every time he moved his hand, Sarah would look directly at him and he would freeze up again. Kid was the most scared of all 3 criminals. He was only 19 years old and had never been in a situation like this before. His first few robberies had been easy jobs where nobody got hurt. Now he was trapped in a room with a woman who looked ready to shoot him if he moved wrong. He wanted to cry but was afraid that would make him look weak in front of Marcus and Dave. "You know this is not going to end well for you," Marcus said, finally breaking the silence. "Even if you keep us here all night, what happens in the morning? When people come to work, they are going to find 3 dead bodies and 1 security guard with a smoking gun. How do you think that is going to look to the police?" Sarah did not answer him, but she was thinking about the same thing. She knew that keeping 3 armed criminals prisoner was dangerous in many ways. If she had to shoot one of them to protect herself, the investigation would be complicated. Even if she was completely in the right, it would change her life forever. But letting them go was not an option either. These men had come here to steal millions of dollars worth of equipment. They were armed and dangerous and would probably come back with more people if she gave them the chance. Her job was to protect this building and everything in it. That was exactly what she was going to do. Marcus tried a different approach when he saw that threats were not working. "Look, lady, you seem like a smart person," he said in a friendlier voice. "Why do not we make a deal? You let us walk out of here right now and we will never come back. We will even tell other people to stay away from this place. You can say you scared us off and your bosses will think you are a hero." Sarah almost smiled at his words. Did he really think she was that stupid? The moment she let them go, they would either come back for revenge or call their friends to finish the job. There was no way she could trust anything Marcus said. "I am not making any deals," Sarah said quietly. "You are staying right where you are until the police come to pick you up." "The police?" Marcus laughed. "How are you going to call the police? Your radio does not work at night and your cell phone is in your car. Face it, lady, you are stuck here just like we are." He was right about that and Sarah knew it. But she also knew something he did not. In about 6 hours, the day shift supervisor would arrive at work. When he found the building locked down and Sarah not answering her radio, he would call for help. All she had to do was keep control of the situation until then. Dave decided to try his own approach. He was supposed to be the smart one in the group and thought he could outsmart this security guard. "You are making a big mistake," he told Sarah. "Do you have any idea how much money is in this building? The computers and electronics in here are worth more than you will make in your whole lifetime. We could cut you in for a share. Just look the other way for 10 minutes and you could walk away rich. Now Sarah did smile, but it was not a happy smile. It was the kind of smile soldiers got when enemies said something particularly stupid. I am not interested in your money, she said. And I am not interested in anything else you have to say, so all three of you need to be quiet and sit still. But Marcus was not ready to give up yet. He had been in jail before and knew that once the police got involved, his life would be over for a long time. He had to find a way out of this situation no matter what it took. Hey, kid, Marcus said suddenly. Remember what I told you about staying strong. These things always work out if you keep your head and wait for the right moment. Sarah realized he was trying to give his partner some kind of signal or instruction. She needed to stop this before it became a bigger problem. Nobody talks, she announced firmly. If anyone says another word, I am going to assume you are planning something dangerous and I will react accordingly. The threat worked for a while. All three men sat quietly against the wall, but Sarah could see them looking at each other and making small gestures with their heads and eyes. They were definitely planning something even if they were not talking about it out loud. Time moved very slowly. Sarah checked her watch and saw that only 90 minutes had passed since she captured the criminals. She had at least 6 more hours to go before help arrived. Her legs were starting to get tired from standing in the same position, but she could not sit down or relax her guard even for a moment. Around midnight, Kid started crying quietly. He tried to hide it, but tears were running down his face and his shoulders were shaking. Sarah felt a little sorry for him, but she could not let that affect her judgment. Young criminals were often the most dangerous because they were unpredictable and desperate. Marcus saw his partner crying and got angry about it. Stop being a baby, he hissed at Kid. This is not over yet. We still have options. What options? Dave whispered back. She has all the guns and we are tied up. Face it, Marcus, this job went wrong from the start. I said no talking, Sarah warned them. But she was starting to worry about what Marcus meant by having options. He was too calm and confident for someone in his position. Either he was bluffing or he really did have some kind of plan she had not thought about. Sarah tried to think about what the criminals might do. They could try to rush her all at once, hoping that one of them would reach her before she could shoot all three. They could try to work their hands free from the zip ties and attack her when she was not expecting it. Or they might have backup coming that she did not know about. The thought of more criminals showing up made Sarah very nervous. Marcus had mentioned people who would come looking for them if they did not check in. Maybe that was not just an empty threat. Maybe there really were other members of their gang who would come to the warehouse. When these three did not return, Sarah moved closer to the doorway so she could watch the hallway while still keeping an eye on her prisoners. If more criminals were coming, she wanted to see them before they saw her. But the hallway stayed dark and quiet. The only sounds were still the humming computers and the breathing of 4 people, who were all getting more tired and stressed as the night went. By 1 in the morning, Sarah realized this was going to be much harder than she had thought. Her back was starting to ache and her eyes were getting dry from staring at the same 3 faces for hours. But every time she blinked or looked away for even a second, she worried that one of the criminals would make a move. The real test was just beginning. Sarah had won the first battle by capturing the 3 men, but the war would be decided by who could last the longest. She had to stay alert and ready while they only had to wait for her to make one small mistake. It was going to be the longest night of her life. By 3 in the morning, Sarah had been awake for over 18 hours. Her body was tired, but her mind stayed sharp and focused. This was something the army had taught her well. How to push through exhaustion and keep going when everything hurt and all she wanted to do was sleep. She had done it before in much worse places than this comfortable warehouse. The 3 criminals were showing more signs of wear than she was. Dave kept shifting around trying to find a comfortable position on the hard concrete floor. Kid had stopped crying, but he looked pale and sick. Even Marcus was not as confident as he had been earlier. His threats and bargaining attempts were getting weaker and more desperate. But around 3:30, Marcus tried something new. He started talking about Sarah herself instead of trying to scare her or bribe her. "You know, I have been thinking about you all night," he said in a quiet voice. "You are not like other security guards I have met. The way you move and hold that gun tells me you have real training. Military, maybe police, let me guess. You used to be a soldier before you took this boring job." Sarah did not answer, but Marcus was right and she knew it. Her posture and the way she handled her weapon probably did give away her background to someone who knew what to look for. But she was not going to confirm or deny anything he said. Marcus kept talking when he saw that his guess had gotten her attention. "I bet you saw some real action overseas," he continued. "Probably got hurt somehow and had to come home. Now you are stuck working night shifts at a warehouse for minimum wage. That has got to be frustrating for someone with your skills and experience." Sarah felt a flash of anger but kept it under control. How dare this criminal try to analyze her life and pretend he understood what she had been through? But she also realized he was trying to get inside her head and distract her. This was a new kind of attack and she had to be ready for it. "You probably missed the excitement," Marcus went on. "The feeling of doing something important instead of just sitting around watching empty buildings all night. I bet part of you is actually enjoying this situation because it reminds you of the old days when your life had meaning." That comment hit closer to home than Sarah wanted to admit. There was some truth to what Marcus was saying. Her army days had been dangerous, but they had also been the most important and exciting time of her life. The warehouse job was safe and quiet, but sometimes it felt like she was wasting her abilities. But Sarah also knew that Marcus was trying to manipulate her emotions and make her careless. She had seen enemy fighters use similar psychological tactics overseas. They would try to make soldiers angry or sad or confused, so they would make mistakes that could be exploited. "You can stop trying to get into my head," Sarah said firmly. "It is not going to work." Marcus smiled like he had scored a point in some kind of game. "I am not trying to do anything," he said innocently. "I am just making conversation to pass the time. We are going to be here for hours, so we might as well talk about something interesting." But Sarah was not fooled. She could see that Marcus was studying her reactions to everything he said. He was looking for weaknesses or pressure points he could use against her later. This was probably how he had survived so many years as a criminal. By being smart and observant and finding ways to turn situations to his advantage, Dave decided to join in the psychological warfare. "Marcus is right about one thing," he said. "You definitely have military training. I can tell by the way you secured this room and positioned yourself. But here is what I do not understand. Why are you protecting this place so hard? It is just a warehouse full of computers that belong to some rich corporation. They probably do not even pay you enough to risk your life for them." Again, Sarah did not respond, but she was listening to every word. These men were trying to plant doubts in her mind about whether her job was worth the danger she was putting herself in. They wanted her to start thinking that maybe she should just let them go and pretend this never happened. Kid tried a different approach. Instead of being threatening or analytical, he tried to sound pitiful and harmless. "Please, miss," he said in a shaky voice. "I really do not want to be here. Marcus made me come with them tonight. I only started doing this stuff because I need money for my sick mother. If you let me go, I promise I will never break the law again." Sarah looked at the young man and felt some sympathy for him. He did seem scared and sorry about what he was doing. But she also knew that feeling sorry for criminals was exactly what they wanted. Kid might be young and frightened, but he was still armed and dangerous when he came into her building tonight. He had made his choice, and now he had to face the consequences. The three men kept taking turns trying to wear down Sarah's resolve. Sometimes they would work together, and sometimes they would contradict each other. Sometimes they tried to make her angry, and sometimes they tried to make her feel guilty. It was like a carefully planned attack on her mind and emotions. Around 4 a.m, Marcus made his most serious attempt yet to break her concentration. He started talking about her family. "I bet you have people who care about you," he said casually. "Parents, maybe brothers and sisters. A boyfriend wondering where you are tonight. They probably think you have a nice safe job where nothing bad can happen. What do you think they would say if they knew you were in here playing soldier with 3 dangerous criminals?" Sarah felt her jaw clench, but she forced herself to stay calm. Marcus was trying to make her think about the people she loved and how they would feel if something happened to her. This was a cruel but effective tactic because it attacked her through her care for others instead of through her own fears. "You know what the worst part is?" Marcus continued. "Even if you survive tonight and we all get arrested, your life is going to change forever. The newspapers will write stories about the brave security guard who captured 3 armed robbers. Everyone will want to interview you and take your picture. You will never have a quiet, peaceful life again." This was another smart attack. Marcus was trying to make Sarah think that winning this confrontation would actually ruin her life in the long run. He wanted her to believe that letting them go would be better for everyone involved. But Sarah had heard enough. She realized that responding to their psychological attacks was exactly what they wanted. The more she engaged with their words, the more opportunities. They had to find something that would shake her confidence or distract her attention. All three of you need to stop talking right now, Sarah said in a voice that was harder than steel. The next person who says anything is going to have a much bigger problem than just being arrested. The threat worked for a while. The server room became quiet again except for the constant humming of the computers. But Sarah could see that the three criminals were getting more desperate as the night went on. They had tried bribery and threats and psychological manipulation. None of it had worked, and they were running out of options. That made them more dangerous than ever. Sarah knew from experience that cornered enemies often made wild, desperate moves when they realized they were losing. She had to stay extra alert now because the next few hours would probably bring the most serious attempts at escape. Around 5 in the morning, something changed in Marcus' eyes. Sarah saw a new kind of determination there that worried her. He was no longer trying to talk his way out of the situation. He was planning something physical and violent. She could sense it in the way he held his body and looked around the room. Sarah shifted her position slightly to get a better angle on all three prisoners. Whatever Marcus was planning, she wanted to be ready for it. The longest night of her life was about to become even more dangerous. The real battle was still ahead. At exactly 6:15 in the morning, Sarah heard the most beautiful sound in the world. Car doors slamming in the parking lot outside the warehouse. She had been holding 3 armed criminals at gunpoint for over 7 hours, and finally help was coming. But she also knew this could be the most dangerous time of all because desperate people do desperate things. Marcus heard the car doors too, and his face went dark with anger. He realized his time was running out, and whatever he was going to do, he needed to do it soon. Dave looked scared and defeated, like he had given up hope of escaping. But Kid seemed almost relieved that the long night was finally coming to an end. Sarah could hear voices outside the building now. Bob, the day guard, was talking to someone else. Probably the warehouse manager who had come to work early and found the building still locked up tight. They would be wondering why Sarah had not answered her radio checks and why her car was still in the parking lot. She knew they would call the police soon if they had not already. But it would still take time for help to arrive and get into the building safely. Sarah had to keep control of the situation for at least another 30 minutes. That might not sound like very long, but when you are tired and stressed and pointing a gun at 3 criminals every minute, feels like an hour. Marcus must have been thinking the same thing because he suddenly started moving, not trying to escape or attack, but shifting his position on the floor like he was getting more comfortable. But Sarah noticed he was actually moving closer to Dave and further from Kid. She realized he was planning something that involved his electronics expert, but not the young, scared criminal. "Stop moving," Sarah ordered. "Stay exactly where you are." "I am just trying to stretch my legs," Marcus said innocently. "I have been sitting on this hard floor for hours. My back is killing me," but Sarah was not fooled. She had seen too many enemy fighters try similar tricks. They would make small, innocent movements until they were in the right position for whatever they were planning. Then they would strike fast and hard, hoping to catch their guards off duty. The voices outside were getting louder now. Sarah could hear Bob explaining to someone that this had never happened before. Sarah was always professional and reliable. Something must be seriously wrong for her not to respond to radio calls. The other voice was asking questions about security procedures and how to get into the building safely. Sarah felt a wave of relief knowing that people were finally aware of her situation, but she also felt a new kind of pressure. Soon there would be police and supervisors and maybe even reporters outside. Everyone would be watching to see how she handled this situation. If she made a mistake now, it would not just put her life at risk. It could embarrass her company and hurt innocent people. Marcus seemed to sense her changing mood because he started talking again. "You hear that?" he said with a nasty smile. "The cavalry is coming to save you. But here is what you have not thought about yet. When the police get here, they are going to surround this building with guns and spotlights and maybe even helicopters. This is going to turn into a huge mess with reporters and television cameras and who knows what else." Sarah tried to ignore him, but Marcus kept talking. "You know what happens in situations like this?" he continued. "Sometimes people get confused in all the excitement. Police officers see someone with a gun and they shoot first and ask questions later. Even if you are the good guy, you could end up getting killed by the people who came to rescue you." This was another psychological attack, but Sarah realized it also contained some real truth. When the police arrived, they would not immediately know who was who in the server room. They would see her with a gun and might assume she was one of the criminals. She would have to be very careful about how she handled the next few minutes. Dave decided to add his own threat to the mix. "Plus, we know your name and where you work," he said. "Even if we go to jail, our friends on the outside will remember what you did to us tonight. You made this personal when you decided to be a hero. That was a bad choice for your long-term health." Sarah felt anger rising in her chest, but she pushed it down. These men were trying to make her afraid of the future so she would make a mistake right now. She could not let them succeed. But she also could not completely ignore their threats. If they really did have criminal associates who might come after her later, she would need to be prepared for that possibility. The sound of sirens began to echo in the distance. Police cars were coming, and probably an ambulance and fire truck too. Within minutes, the quiet warehouse district would be full of flashing lights and uniformed officers. Sarah felt both relief and worry at the same time. Around 6:45, Marcus made his move. Without any warning, he suddenly rolled toward Dave and whispered something urgent in his ear. Before Sarah could react, Dave had somehow gotten one hand partially free from his zip ties. The electronics expert really was good with his hands and had been working on the restraints for hours while pretending to sit quietly. "Both of you stop," Sarah shouted, pointing her gun directly at them, but Marcus was not stopping. He rolled again, putting Dave between himself and Sarah's weapon. Now she could not shoot at Marcus without risking hitting Dave. It was a smart move that showed Marcus really was a professional criminal who knew how to think under pressure. Dave used his partially free hand to help Marcus work on his own restraints. Within seconds, both men had loosened their zip ties enough to slip their hands free. They were still sitting on the floor, but now they were no longer helpless prisoners. Sarah realized the situation had just become much more dangerous. Two of the three criminals were no longer secured, and they were working together. She had to make a decision quickly before they got completely free and tried to rush her position. Kid saw what was happening and started shouting. "Do not do this, Marcus," he yelled. "The police are coming. Just give up before someone gets shot." But Marcus was not listening to anyone now. He had spent too many hours being humiliated by a woman he thought should have been easy to handle. His pride and his freedom were both on the line, and he was willing to risk everything to try to turn the situation around. Sarah heard footsteps in the hallway outside the server room. Heavy boots moving fast toward her position. The police had gotten into the building faster than she expected. But she could not turn around to look or call out to them because that would give Marcus and Dave the opening they needed to attack. The next few seconds would determine whether Sarah survived the longest night of her life or whether her story would end in tragedy. Everything she had accomplished over the past 8 hours was about to be put to the ultimate test. Marcus looked directly at her with hate in his eyes. "You should have taken the deal when I offered it," he said. Then he lunged forward with Dave right behind him. Sarah had less than 2 seconds to decide whether to shoot or try some other way to stop them. The sound of police boots was getting closer, but not close enough. She was still on her own for the most critical moment of the entire ordeal. This was it, the moment that would define everything. Sarah had exactly 1 second to make the most important decision of her life. Marcus and Dave were lunging toward her with desperate fury in their eyes. She could hear police boots running down the hallway, but they would not reach the server room in time to help her. After 8 hours of perfect control, she was facing the moment that would decide everything. Instead of shooting, Sarah made a choice that surprised everyone, including herself. She stepped sideways and used her military training to kick Marcus hard in the chest as he tried to grab her. The big man flew backward into Dave, and both criminals crashed into the server equipment. Sparks flew and alarms started beeping as expensive computers were damaged by the impact. Marcus tried to get up, but Sarah was already moving again. She grabbed Dave by his shirt and threw him back toward the wall where Kid was still sitting with his hands tied. Then she pointed her gun at Marcus, who was struggling to stand up among the broken computer equipment. "Stay down," she ordered him. "This is over." But Marcus was beyond rational thinking now. He had spent his whole adult life as a criminal, and the idea of being defeated by one small woman was more than his pride could handle. He reached for a piece of broken metal from the damaged servers and raised it like a weapon. That was when the police burst through the doorway. "Drop your weapons," everyone on the ground now shouted. The first officer threw the door. For a moment there was total confusion. The police saw Sarah holding a gun and Marcus holding a piece of metal. They did not immediately know who was the security guard and who were the criminals. Sarah realized this was the exact danger Marcus had warned her about earlier. "I am the security guard," Sarah called out clearly. "These 3 men are the intruders. I have been holding them here for over 8 hours waiting for you to arrive." The police officers were well trained and experienced. They quickly figured out what was happening by looking at the zip ties on the floor and seeing that Kid was still partially restrained. Within minutes, they had Marcus and Dave in handcuffs and were helping Kid to his feet. Sarah finally lowered her weapon after 8 hours and 23 minutes of the most intense experience of her life. Her hands were shaking now that the danger was over, but she felt proud and relieved and completely exhausted, all at the same time. The lead police officer was a sergeant named Williams who had been doing this job for 15 years. He had never seen anything quite like what Sarah had accomplished. "Ma, I have to ask you some questions about what happened here tonight," he said respectfully. "But first I want to say that what you did was incredible. Holding 3 armed criminals by yourself for that long is something most trained officers would find very difficult." Sarah nodded and began explaining everything that had happened from the moment she first heard the strange noise at the loading dock. She told the whole story in a calm, professional voice like she was giving a military briefing. The police officers listened with growing amazement as they realized the extent of what this young woman had endured. While Sarah was being interviewed, other officers were searching the warehouse and processing the crime scene. They found the tools and weapons the criminals had brought with them. They also discovered that Marcus had a long criminal record and was wanted in 3 other states for similar robberies. Dave had been arrested before for breaking into computer systems and stealing information. Even Kid had been caught shoplifting and selling drugs. The warehouse manager arrived while the police were still working. His name was Mr. Peterson, and he had been worried sick when he found the building locked up and Sarah not responding to radio calls. He had expected to find her hurt or dead. Instead, he found her calmly answering questions and looking like she had just finished a normal shift. "Sarah, I do not know how to thank you," Mr. Peterson said with tears in his eyes. "You saved millions of dollars worth of equipment and probably prevented these men from robbing other places too. The company is going to want to give you a reward and probably a big promotion." Sarah was too tired to think about rewards or promotions. All she wanted was to go home and sleep for about 12 hours. But she knew there would be more questions from detectives and insurance investigators. There would probably be newspapers and television reporters who wanted to interview her. The quiet life she had enjoyed as a night security guard was definitely over. By 9 in the morning, the excitement was mostly finished. Marcus, Dave, and Kid had been taken to jail. The police had collected all their evidence and taken dozens of photographs. The damaged server equipment had been examined by technicians who said it could be repaired or replaced. Sarah was finally allowed to leave the warehouse. As she walked to her car, she saw that the parking lot was full of police cars and news vans. Reporters were trying to get her attention and photographers were taking pictures. She ignored them all and drove home as quickly as possible. At home, Sarah took a long hot shower and put on comfortable clothes. She made herself some breakfast and sat down to think about everything that had happened. In less than 12 hours, her entire life had changed. She was no longer just a quiet security guard that nobody paid attention to. She was a hero who had done something most people would consider impossible. Her phone started ringing around noon. Reporters wanted interviews. Her family wanted to make sure she was safe. Other security companies wanted to offer her jobs. The army base where she used to serve sent a message saying they were proud of her and that she had brought honor to all military veterans. Sarah turned off her phone and tried to rest, but she could not stop thinking about the night before. She kept seeing Marcus' eyes full of hate and desperation. She kept hearing the sound of police boots in the hallway. She kept feeling the weight of her weapon in her hands during those long, dark hours. Over the next few days, Sarah's story spread across the country. Newspapers called her the security guard hero. Television shows wanted her to appear as a guest. The warehouse company gave her a $10,000 reward and offered to promote her to head of security for all their buildings. But the most meaningful recognition came from other veterans who understood what she had really accomplished. They knew that staying calm and focused under pressure for 8 hours was not just about being brave. It was about having the kind of training and discipline that only comes from real military experience. Sarah never went back to working as a night security guard. Instead, she used her newfound fame to start her own security consulting business. She helped other companies train their guards and improve their safety procedures. She spoke at police academies and military schools about staying calm under pressure. Years later, people still remembered the story of the small, quiet woman who held 3 armed criminals at gunpoint for over 8 hours. It became an example that instructors used to teach students about courage and determination. It proved that heroes do not always look like what people expect. And sometimes the most dangerous person in the room really is the one that everybody underestimates.